This is a question about study recruitment and transparency, and we got a number of questions from families on this subject. And the question will be directed to Dr. Rothklein and then Dr. Horrigan. How can families or individuals affected by a rare disorder protect themselves from undue influence and obtain the accurate information needed to decide whether or not to participate in rare disease research? And my experience as a parent is most families go to the internet and to social networking sites as their first point of gathering information. And on many, it's very difficult as a parent to sort through the Google searches and the Facebook comments to really sort that out and get the accurate information and not be swept away in a mass enthusiasm, but to really methodically gather the information and make a very informed decision. And so how do families go about getting that information? And that's for you, Dr. Klein.
I think that there are several approaches, but one of the things that I wanted to point out about research is by the time the protocols that families might be interested in enrolling in are actually open to them to be able to see, it's gone through multiple levels of review. It's mandatory that every institution have a properly constituted institutional review board whose job it is to review those protocols. There's also often scientific review both within the institution and for researchers to even be able to get the grants to conduct the trials at all. And if the product is something that is regulated by FDA, so a drug, a vaccine, a biological product, something else, a medical device product, then it's reviewed as well by the agency, at least at some level, before that ever starts. And so I think that when you talk about research, those protocols have been through multiple levels of both scientific and hopefully ethical review as well, to make sure that they're appropriate. And so generally speaking, the information that is in there, or the scientific question that is being discussed has at least had multiple levels of review for that kind of accuracy, whereas information that you see on the internet obviously doesn't necessarily have that. It depends where you go to be able to get your information. I myself use the FDA website. There's amazing amount of information available on the FDA website, especially for all kinds of different drugs. It's not necessarily easy to navigate, but it's there, and it's an absolute wealth of information. And particularly for pediatric products, there's a lot of reviews that have been posted of all of those drugs, and so you can see some of what the agency does and writes and sees in relation to some of these products that are already marketed. Now, that's not necessarily going to help if you're talking about an investigational medication that's not already marketed, but again, you have to think about the reliability of the websites where you're getting your information.
So a couple of short answers came to my mind. One is obviously your trusted clinician. So in the instance of your child, it would be your pediatrician, where you're going to the pediatrician saying, here's this clinical trial that I heard about. Here's what I'm seeing on Facebook or on Twitter or what have you, and what do you think about it? And so I think it's legitimate to whoever your trusted healthcare provider is, primary care, to at the very least to have that discussion. Whether or not they have more than 7 minutes for that discussion, I can't attest to, but you could ask for it. And then so that's one thing. Then the other thing, just thinking of Angelman Syndrome Foundation and what Charlie's role is, I'm sure you get brought into these sorts of discussions time and again through just the central office capacity, and Eileen does, and others, to render an opinion about the credibility or lack thereof of a potential idea or project or study that's being talked about. Certainly in the instance of autism, you all could imagine how often I have to deal with those sorts of things in my role in the science division at Autism Speaks. It's a lot. It's a big chunk of my job to try to help people to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the value proposition of a given experiment or project that's being talked about on the internet. So you have that there. And then the only other thing I was going to say, in terms of what I find out there in like clinicaltrials.gov, there still are, which is a really helpful resource, but there still are a lot of really creative studies that you can find that are investigator initiated and in some way, shape, or form are being done, and that you can find. I mean, you could put the word hyperbaric oxygen out there, for example, and really quickly find some very interesting and creative studies that would trigger lengthy discussions with your pediatrician or family practitioner around this. So I just bring that as a caveat, that in the instance of investigator-initiated studies that may have atypical sources of funding where they've gone ahead and posted it, some of the safeguards you're talking about may not apply.
Right.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that subject?
Might I ask a question instead? Would you encourage families to ask A, their physicians, but B, organizations that, for instance, Autism Speaks or Angelman Syndrome Foundation or organizations related for their opinions on such studies?
Well, one would certainly hope that that in fact, if there were credible studies going on and there was an organization such as ASF or Autism Speaks, that they would be aware of that. And so I think it certainly follows that that's a good place to start in terms of trying to get information. I mean, I know sometimes some of these studies can be listed on these websites, and so you can find ways of even thinking about are these people good investigators? Is it a known list of investigators to the organization? And sure, that always helps.
Yeah, and in the instance of autism, there's just so much clinical trial activity going on that it's really difficult to stay on top of everything. I do these office hours on the internet once a week, not once a week, once a month now, where I'll just take as many questions as I can take and just start typing. You can all see my typos as I'm typing the answers, but a good number of them deal with clinical trial questions and have been dealing with that. And I try to do the ones that that I feel confident and I can write about. And my answers live in perpetuity in the internet. But that's just kind of one miniature way that I try to at least jump in and be helpful on that. But I'm not sure that I have sort of a panacea for that. That'd be more universally helpful.